Before we get into this video, I want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor MailTag. MailTag is a free Chrome browser extension that allows you to track your emails in real time, schedule your emails to be sent later, and automate your email follow-ups. And the best part is it's completely free. Be sure to check out MailTag in the Chrome store. The link is also in the description below. Hey, what's going on, guys? So many of you know that I've been really working hard on my next course. I'm also moving, so my time has been very limited. I haven't really had the time to do any in-depth coding YouTube projects. So I figured that we could discuss something that many people may be interested in, something I'm asked a lot, and that's if jQuery is still relevant in 2018. And after watching this video, I'd like to hear from you guys. Do you still use it? What do you use it for? Do you think it's dead or dying, and so on? Now, a word of caution, I know developers can be very, territorial over the technologies they use, and any video like this can always get a little controversial, although I do try my hardest not to make it that. As with any video like this, take it with a grain of salt and never let just one video influence you too much. Make sure you do your extended research and form your own opinions. All right, so why make this video? Well, what I want to do here is I want to look at the jQuery library, what it includes, and what I mean by that is the main things that it's used for. And I want to provide people with some alternate solutions using vanilla JavaScript and also some specialized libraries, okay? Because I think that some people aren't aware of how far JavaScript has come since ES5. We'll also look at the pros and cons of jQuery, and hopefully it can help you decide if it's still relevant or worth learning. And of course, at the end, I'll give you my opinion and my direction, which again, take with a grain of salt because I'm just one person. All right, so first off, I want to say that jQuery was and still is an awesome library. It's probably the best generalized JavaScript library that was ever created. Many developers owe their career to jQuery. I can pretty much say that for myself as well, because back when it was so much more difficult to write vanilla JavaScript when it came to the DOM and stuff like that, jQuery really allowed us to do things that we may have given up on if this library didn't exist. So I do have a deep respect for jQuery as a technology and what it's done for web developers and even web designers. So jQuery was king for many years, starting, 2006, something like that, before I even started doing web development. And there were a few reasons for that. It was an all-in-one library that you could use for almost anything. That includes DOM manipulation, AJAX calls, utilities, animations, just a lot of different things. And it was very easy to learn. At the time, it was much easier than doing this stuff with pure JavaScript. It was also cross-browser compatible. Now, if you wanted to do something and you looked at the jQuery code and then the JavaScript code, you would ask yourself, why the hell would I not use jQuery for this situation? It was much less code. It was much easier code to write and understand. We also didn't have many, if any, frameworks at that time for things like DOM manipulation. There was no React or Angular. I mean, there were some other frameworks starting to pop up, but they were very new and they weren't that great. So jQuery was often learned before JavaScript, and that's just because it was so much more understandable and allowed you to really do things much faster and made you feel more productive. On top of that, you had jQuery plugins that gave you this instant functionality for specific things. All right, but a lot of that has changed, not just in 2018, but in the past few years. I'd say since about 2015 or so, since ES6 really. JavaScript has made huge strides, and jQuery is no longer needed in many situations. So what I want to do is go through some code examples, compare the jQuery version to the vanilla JavaScript version, and I think it'll give some beginners some perspective because they may be looking at jQuery articles from 2013 and not even know that this stuff exists. All right, so let's start off with DOM selection. All right, this is probably the first thing that you learned when you learned jQuery. It was one of the most valuable assets to be able to take any CSS selector, whether it's a class, an element, a nested element, pseudo elements, anything, and treat it as an individual node in your JavaScript. We would simply wrap it in a $ in parentheses, and then we could do what we want with it. If we wanted to do this with JavaScript back in the day, the only similar option was get element by ID, but that had to strictly be an ID. We did have get by class name and get by tag name, but that would return not the direct element, but I believe an HTML collection, which we had to do all kinds of hocus pocus just to get a single element and do something like change a class name or something like that. And then even once you got the element, doing something with it in the DOM was much more work with vanilla JavaScript. All right, well, now we have query selector to get a single element, and if we want to get groups of elements, like let's say we want a group of li tags, we can use query selector all, which returns a node list that we can treat as an array. And these two methods take in just about anything that a jQuery selector will take in, including all the things that I mentioned earlier. They're also both compatible in all modern browsers, including IE. So at least to me, for simple selection, it may be a bit longer to type, but I wouldn't use a large multi-purpose library to save a few characters, and you could always just define it in a variable, and it will be the same length anyways when you're running your methods on it and so on. Also, if you're interested, there is a tiny library, I believe it's called Bling, that allows you to use the $, just like jQuery, in place of document.querySelector. So in terms of selection, it's the exact same thing, and I don't see any reason to use jQuery for DOM selection. All right, so what about DOM manipulation, traversing, things like that? Now, if I'm not mistaken, all modern browsers, with the exception of some versions of IE, include all of these APIs. And these are just some of them. There's a lot more. But you can also use a transpiler like Babel to compile your JavaScript for all browsers. So we have jQuery on the left in blue and vanilla JavaScript on the right in green. And you can see there's not much difference between a lot of these. Now, this element here, money sign element, would be a jQuery selector. This over here, this element variable, would be document.querySelector or document.getElementById, something like that. But you can see that a lot of the methods are the exact same. We can remove something using .remove. We can prepend another element using .prepend. We can insert something before with .before. When it comes to changing classes and stuff, it's a little different. You'll see jQuery uses add class. Vanilla JavaScript uses classlist.add, which is a little different, but not much. Remove class, we have classlist.remove, and we can even toggle with classlist.toggle. And then if we want to, let's say, select a parent element, in jQuery we would use the parent method. In vanilla JavaScript we would just use parent node. Okay, if we wanted to clone, we could use clone in jQuery. We could use clone node in vanilla JavaScript. And then the true just means that we want to clone its child nodes as well. All right, and these are just some of them. I do have a course called Modern JavaScript from the Beginning, which I'll link in the description, where we go over these and a lot of other modern JavaScript APIs, native APIs. All right, so what about events? Now, jQuery has a lot of event-related methods, so many that it can be a little confusing, but one example is the on method. So in this case, what we're doing is taking an element and calling .on, passing in the event that we want to look for, which is a click, and then we have a callback where we execute our logic. All right, and if we look at the vanilla JavaScript version, now you can use inline events, but it's not recommended at all. What's recommended is add event listener. So we would take that element, add event listener, add in the event, which in this case is a click, and then a callback. In this case, I used an ES6 arrow function. Okay, and I would definitely suggest learning ES6 before learning jQuery. I could use a callback function here, just like I did up here as well, but I'll personally prefer arrow functions. But then we would just have our logic. So not much difference here. So again, why use jQuery for events? All right, so now let's talk about HTTP requests and AJAX calls. Now, for years, jQuery was preferred by just about everyone over the horrible syntax of XHR, which is the XML HTTP request object used to send AJAX requests. Well, with ES6, we got the Fetch API, which is a promise-based API to make HTTP requests in a very easy way. We simply call fetch, we pass in the URL, we can also pass in an object if we want to change the method, like for instance a post request, and also of course if we want to send data along with that, or any header options, anything like that. And then we get a promise back which contains a lot of stuff. And what we do here is just usually map it to JSON so that we can get the JSON data. And then we just add one more dot then, which gives us the actual data, and then we can do what we want with it. So it's very easy. It's a very easy syntax, and we can also, of course, use async await and clean it up even more to make it look less asynchronous. Okay, make it look more synchronous. And then in addition to fetch, we have smaller specialized specialized libraries such as Axios, which is a fantastic library. Now, yes, it is a library, but it's a tiny library that does one thing great as opposed to doing a bunch of things. And you can see the syntax is just Axios dot whatever the request, pass in the URL, one dot then, and we can just get res.data. So very, very simple. It's even easier than the fetch API. All right, so that is AJAX requests. And I didn't have enough room to put in the jQuery AJAX, but I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen that before. All right, so that brings us to utilities. Now, jQuery has a slew of handy utilities for manipulating arrays and stuff like that. We could easily check to see if something was an array or if something is contained in an array with this isArray or inArray. But now in vanilla JavaScript, we can do array.isArray, pass in something that'll tell us if it's an array or not. If we want to check to see if something is in the array, one option would be to use index of. If it's there, it'll give us the index. If not, it'll give us -1, so we can just test for that. JavaScript also now has a bunch of high order array methods which are just fantastic. For instance, if we wanted to loop through an array in jQuery, we had the each method. Now we have the high order function for each that we can call on an array. So we can say dot for each, and we can get the value of each element, or each value in the array. We can also get the index, of course, just like we could with each. If we wanted to, let's say, translate all items in an array or an object to a new array of items, we used map in jQuery, but now we actually have map in JavaScript, which works in a very similar way. If we wanted to, let's say, find the elements of an array that satisfy a filter function, we had grep in jQuery. Now we have filter in JavaScript. Another one is parse JSON in jQuery to parse a JSON string. Now we have JSON.parse. So you can see these are very, very similar and pretty much the same length, pretty much the same amount of work, minus the big library. All right, so animations. Now, animations with vanilla JavaScript is one thing that is much more difficult than with jQuery, but there are many other options. So if you're going to use animations with JavaScript, you're probably going to be using CSS transitions or keyframes to do things like fade-ins and stuff like that, which is more trickier than using, dot fade in, dot fade toggle or whatever. We also have the Web Animations API, which I'm not that familiar with, so I can't really speak on that much. And then we also have third-party libraries like GreenSock, which again is a specialized library that does one thing really well, which is kind of the trend that we're seeing these days. Instead of using this large generalized library, we're using these smaller libraries for specialized functions or specialized just aspects of your application. All right, so Let's take a look at the list now of jQuery's main uses. So DOM selection, we now have query selector all. DOM manipulation, we have native browser APIs, pretty much all standard in all modern browsers. Of course, IE always gives us shit, but we have compilers like Babel and polyfills. And HTTP AJAX, Fetcher Axios. I actually would prefer to use this over jQuery syntax anyways. Utilities, we have map, filter, reduce, etc. Or Lodash. Lodash is another library that is fantastic because you can just load in the specific utility that you want. If you wanted to use just map, you could bring in map from Lodash, which, you know, is a very small file size. Animation, you can use CSS3 or use a third-party specialized library, whether it's a JavaScript library like GreenSock or something like animate.css. There's a lot of different options out there. And then browser support, which was a big reason for a long time to use jQuery. Well, now we have modern browsers, and we also have things like Babel, and we have polyfills, so that's not really an issue. So you can decide for yourself if jQuery is needed, I guess. I'm not going to say it's not relevant yet. We'll get to that. But as far as these main things that it's used for go, you can decide if it's needed. Now, this video may seem like I'm just shitting all over jQuery, but there's really only two things that bother me about it these days. The biggest being that some beginners still proceed to learn jQuery, which is a JavaScript library, before learning the JavaScript language and what it's capable of, especially with all the strides it's made since ES6. I think everyone should learn a language before a library or a framework in that case. Another thing is, as I just went over with logical code examples, is that it's not needed in many cases. And it's not needed in its most used cases anymore. Even if you can't do something with vanilla JavaScript, I would recommend using a specialized library, not a generalized one. All right. Now, I haven't even mentioned frameworks yet. Frameworks really are the future, at least for larger applications or mid-sized to large applications. My suggestion is to learn JavaScript, learn the language, all the modern syntax and all that, and then focus on a framework like React, Angular, or Vue. These are frameworks that are the future. Okay. Not just the future, but the now. If you look at the jobs that are needed, they're asking for React developers, Angular developers. Vue isn't as popular in the job market, but it is getting up there, and it's also just an awesome framework. So that's what I would suggest. Now, with all that said, I bet you thought that I was going to say, screw jQuery, it's not relevant. Well, that's not the case. It is still relevant, even in 2018. And the reason that I say that is because although it's phasing out, which may be a debate for some people may say it's not, but I think it's phasing out, and most developers seem to agree with that. It is still widely used in applications and websites that have been around, especially ones that have been around for a while. And it's almost a guarantee that you're going to run into it in your career. Now, if you know JavaScript and you're decent with it, jQuery will be simple to learn. You'll get it very quickly, and you don't have to master every single method. But just learning, DOM selection and all that is going to be very, very easy for you if you already know JavaScript, if you know basic DOM manipulation already. My suggestion is to learn jQuery, but I would suggest learning it as kind of a supplement after learning JavaScript, maybe after you learn the basics of a framework. And I don't mean just learn about for loops and functions in JavaScript. Learn ES6, learn the fetch API, at least the basics of DOM manipulation. And by the way, one of the best ways to do that is with my 21-hour course, Modern JavaScript from the Beginning. Had to throw a shameless plug in there. Not to be a salesman and promote my own course, but my goal for that course was to do just that, is to teach people modern JavaScript without having to use a library. All right, now I'm not saying that jQuery is useless in 2018. I would use jQuery typically on a simple site with no framework when I need a quick solution, or a plugin that usually involves some kind of animation. Animation isn't my strong suit, so maybe for certain types of sliders, counters, scrollers, things like that. I haven't written jQuery in quite a while, but even my own website uses a jQuery plugin for the animating numbers at the bottom with the subscribers and views and all that stuff. That's actually a jQuery plugin, which I do plan to rewrite in vanilla JavaScript. I just haven't had the time. And I guess that's a perfect example of what I would use it for, is to get something up, up and running quickly that is basically temporary until I can find the time to revamp it the way I want. I guess Quick Solutions is my main use for jQuery, mostly by plugins, but I never use it for writing simple individual things like DOM manipulation or HTTP requests or anything like that. We have vanilla JavaScript and specialized for libraries for that, as well as of course frameworks for larger applications. React and Angular, they all do that DOM manipulation and stuff even better than vanilla JavaScript does. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and remember, I'm just one person. You can disagree with everything I just said, and that's absolutely fine. Everyone's different and everyone thinks in a different way. I do my best to look at the facts, and in this case, actual logical pieces of code. But of course, I had to throw my own opinion in as well. But I also respect yours, whatever it is. If you swear by jQuery and you think it's the best thing in the world, I respect that because you've had different experiences than I have. And I'd like to hear those experiences, and if you guys still use jQuery, what you think about it and all that. So please leave a comment if you want. And, just be respectful and mature. But that's going to be it, guys. Thanks, and I will see you in the next video. Before I go, I just want to give another huge shout out to our sponsor, Mailtag. Mailtag is a free Chrome browser extension that allows you to track your emails in real time, schedule your emails to be sent later, and automate your email follow-ups. And the best part is it's completely free, so be sure to check out Mailtag in the Chrome store. The link is also in the description below.